was in a Welcome everyone to the Freelance Journalist Empowerment Conference. Freelance journalists from all across the world are coming together during this next 3 days to gain skills, build connections, and celebrate the power of the community to make a difference. Hello, I'm Anna from the European Journalism Center, and today I will be hosting this event together with my colleagues, Angela, Sebastian, Gaura, and Rosalind, who will be joining you in the chat and moderating the conversation. Welcome, Angela. How are you today? Please don't make us feel jealous. Conversation. Welcome, Angela. How are you today? Please don't make us feel jealous. Conversation. Welcome, Angela. How are you today? Please don't make us feel jealous. Conversation. Welcome, Angela. How are you today? Hi, Angie. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
But okay, no, to start the conversation and to start the celebration, I want to invite everyone to write your name and write also the place where you are based in. It is amazing to see all of you coming from different places to join the conference. We see people from different continents, people from Yemen, from India, from the Netherlands, from Germany. We are very happy to have you all here because it is only together as a community that we can face the challenges that maybe after the pandemic were exacerbated. But that's why we are here. We are here to learn new skills. We are here also to hear about good practices, methods, strategies that are going to help the community to overcome the challenges successfully. So, Angie, I would like to know if you can hear me and if you can participate. The challenges successfully.
Hi,
So,
Anna.
Angie, I would like to know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
I'm gonna help
But
participate
I hear some kind of
challenges
echo,
successfully. So, Angie, I would like to know if you can hear me.
I can hear you, Anna. Yes. But there is some kind of
challenges
echo, so maybe it's better that
So, Angie, I would like to know if you can hear me. Participate challenges successfully. So, Angie, I would like to know if you can hear me.
Hi, Anna. Can you hear me? Hi, Anna.
Should I go now? Yeah, I think that there is an echo. Thank you very much, all of you, for letting us know. We're gonna solve it as soon as possible. But yeah, the idea is that during this conference, we will learn how to pitch stories successfully, how to collaborate and create cross-border teams, which is very important nowadays. And at the same time, we will hear about the latest storytelling trends, data, and mobile journalism, and how to use social media to engage with your audience. Together, we will explore the opportunities offered from solutions and slow journalism. And most importantly, we will hear about the cases of freelance journalism around the world. And we cannot be more excited about our speakers line up. During the next 3 days, more than 40 media experts and freelancers will join the conference to share with us their knowledge, know-how, and experience. And we're going to start today with the talks of two amazing award-winner journalists. We're going to start our journey with Maria Reza, co-founder, CEO, and executive editor from Rappler. Then we're going to continue with Fisayo Soyombo, freelance investigative journalist and founder of the Foundation for Investigative Journalism. Then we will continue our journey with Sophia Smith-Galler from the BBC and Ronan Robertson from Data for Change, who will tell us the secrets behind TikTok and data storytelling. Next, we will enjoy an amazing panel where journalists and editors from different media are going to share with us tips to create a killer pitch. And finally, during our workshops, we're going to learn together how to use mobile and data journalism to step up our game. And I would like to let you know that this is possible only thank you to our partners, the partners of the Freelance Journalism Assembly. With these 23 organizations that you are watching right now, your screens, we created an amazing network, a support network for freelance journalists. So this is amazing. We invite you to check their initiatives, projects, and events. But to start with our conference, I would like to invite Lars Boring, Deputy Director of the European Journalism Center, who would like to say a few words to all of you. Welcome, Lars.
Thank you very much, and have a good day, everybody. I'm happy to be able to help open up this great assembly. I just joined the AJC, the European Journalism Center. I'm now a deputy director, but soon I'll take over the work of Adam Thomas, who's leaving the organization. And he has done great work. Since 1992, the European Journalism Center has been building a sustainable, ethical, and innovative future for journalism through grants, events, training, research, and media development. We are an international nonprofit that connects journalists with new ideas, and I am very privileged and happy to lead it. The times of journalism are challenging and interesting. I'm an optimist, and I think that we can make it a better place. That's why I joined the AGC. As Maria Ressa says, we also have lots of challenges. She will soon talk to you. She's the co-founder and CEO of Rappler. And she says, we are living through a unique moment where information is power. For journalists, for people at the front lines of trying to fight for truth, this is an existential moment for journalism and for democracy. I cannot repeat that phrase more and more as we all should. Journalism is something that the world needs. Informed society needs it, and we should also be there to support it, not just as us, as a working organization, but also the people that live throughout the world, and for us, especially in Europe. Today, I hope you will enjoy a wonderful day full of inspiring sessions, information, and I hope that you will have lots to think about at the end and lots to talk about, which you can do through our communities that we support through our organization. I want to thank the whole team at AGC and, of course, our supporters for making this all possible. I think without them, this will not happen. And I would say that keep joining us in the future and keep up this fight for journalism. And let's see how we can make this world a better place. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lars, for your nice words and for joining us today. I can see people that is writing in the chat that is joining us from Oslo, Helsinki, many people from India, also from the Solomon Islands. Amazing. So it's also very important to mention that the Freelance Journalism Assembly is not only free and open to everyone, it's also an inclusive space to discuss here. So be respectful with each other during the live chat. Our team is going to share with you in the live chat our policy harassment.
That's great. Thank you, Angie. And talking about chats and conversations, I want to remind everyone that we're taking the conversation about the Freelance Journalist Empowerment Conference to our social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. So please let us know what you think using the hashtag FJ Assembly. And now we're ready to start, but before we want to have a really short activity, because being freelancer can be a lonely business, and sometimes as human beings we just need someone to ask us how we feel, and today we would love to know how you are feeling. To do so, we created a mood barometer. Our team is sharing with you the link in the chat. So please click on this link and let us know how are you feeling today on a scale from 1, if you are feeling tired or maybe a little bit worried, to 7 if you are feeling excited and full of energy. And now probably you are seeing in your screen how is the collective mood. Personally, I think I'm between a 6 and 7. What about you, Angie? How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling 7, and I think it's because I'm here with you doing this event and the sun is shining outside.
No, that's great. And here in the collective mood, we see different levels of energy, but it is nice to see that the media is between 4 and 7. So that's really great because we can keep this energy for the rest of the event. So we can continue, Angie.
Yes, I would like to do, one last reminder. To facilitate the networking, we invite you to go to the Freelance Journalism Assembly website. There you can create a profile in our community section according to your interests and skills. Our matching score will show you your potential collaborators, mentors, or mentees.
I think it's brilliant. Now we are all set. It is time to welcome our keynote speaker. She doesn't need an introduction, but please welcome Maria Reza, Rappler's co-founder, CEO, and executive director. She's also a multiple award winner for her contributions to human rights and journalism, for her courage and work on disinformation and fake news. Maria was named Times Magazine's 2018 Person of the Year. She was among its 100 most influential people of 2019 and has also been named one of the Times most influential women of the century. And last but not least, she is also a nominee for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. Maria will tell us more about why freelance journalists are key for the news ecosystem and are also a fundamental part to improve and to promote independence, resilience, and quality in journalism. Maria, welcome. The floor is yours. It's an honor to have you here.
It is so good to be here. Thank you so much, Anna. It's interesting. You started with a mood barometer. We have a mood meter, right? And if you guys haven't yet read this great seminal book from many years ago, it's called Connected. And there's this idea of the 3 degrees of influence rule. Like, believe it or not, every emotion spreads through 3 degrees of influence, right? So if you're feeling happy, your friend will feel happy to a percentage, and then your friend's friend will feel happy because you're feeling happy, and then finally your friend's friend's friend, the third degree, will feel happy because you do. I'll put a link to that. It's one of the key studies that we used to create Rappler in, my gosh, a while ago. So sorry, I got derailed, but I loved your mood barometer. So, and we of course know what's happened globally, right? Like how mood travels through social networks, and on social media, it can be catastrophic at times. So let me talk about the 3 things. And, first of all, thank you for asking me to speak to you. I think that this is, Lars said it. Let me start with my 3 points: high risk, high reward, impact, and then redefining journalism. I think that's what you guys are doing every day. And I think if you haven't grabbed that power, how you're handling it, then let me see if I can try to just nudge it in the next 10 minutes. These are just a few thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours afterwards. I think this is the time when people coming together actually create something that we couldn't have figured out on our own. Lars said this. He said, "This time matters." He quoted me to myself. So I'm going to say it again. This time matters. It is an existential moment, not just for democracy, but for our profession, for journalism, for news organizations. And as freelance journalists, you're actually on the front lines of the front lines. We all know the risks of being a freelance journalist, right? You're not an employee of a news organization, so you have to cope with that. But I'll hopefully show you why that is a good thing, especially now. Here's today's context for news organizations. There are five. One is the business model is dead. Two, our gatekeeping power is dead. Three, the tech companies that have taken over our gatekeeping power have abdicated responsibility. Four, the world has splintered and fragmented into smaller and smaller pieces because of the shift in our information ecosystem. And then five, trust. Trust is dead. And let me explain this just a little more. The design of the social media platforms, which are now the world's largest distributor of news, by design, they divide and they radicalize. This is now documented in research after research, a fundamental problem for society. But this design has brought significant profits. I mean, for Facebook alone in 2020, its net income was $29 billion. The incentive to keep going down this dystopian path is extremely powerful. But all of us around the world, we live with the consequences. At the end of it all, what's broken after the Friends of Friends algorithm pulls our democracy apart is trust. And you know why? Well, because we become isolated. We're pulled apart as Friends of Friends as we shift over, whether you're pro-Trump or pro-Duterte or anti-Duterte. Over the years, you get pulled apart. So as each side is isolated, they can create their own facts, which makes facts debatable. Without facts, there's no truth, no trust. Without any of these three, we don't have democracy, we don't have a shared reality. We're literally living in the Matrix. I'm going to put two movies together, The Matrix, right? And Truman Show. We're now more than 3 billion Truman shows, each performing, but who's really watching, right? And here's an opportunity. I know that sounds really horrible, but it is the same opportunity that pushed me and my co-founders to create Rappler 9 years ago. 9 years ago. It's been that long. By next year, it'll be a decade. Traditional media organizations then, 9 years ago, couldn't move fast enough to deal with how quickly our world was changing, how quickly tech was changing it. My co-founders and I left behind managing more than 1,000 journalists in the largest news organization in the Philippines because it was saddled with legacy systems and political structures, infighting, that made innovation so incredibly hard. Don't get me wrong. Our early experiments there with citizen journalism, harnessing the wisdom of the crowds, that's really important, right? Because there's a difference between the wisdom of the crowds, where we each have our individual will and we're actually able to make decisions, versus the mob. So that our early experiments there with citizen journalism and harnessing the wisdom of the crowds actually led to Rappler. Right? So here's what we got by leaving. And I hope that you actually cherish that. What we got by leaving is two things: agility and independence. They're hard. You gave up money for agility and independence. You can mitigate the risks by creating your own communities. Rappler's elevator pitch in 2012 is that we build communities of action, and the food we feed our communities is journalism. Without facts, you can't act, right? So we started from nothing. We put 12 people together, only 12. And using our own real world networks, our family and friends, we created our own distribution network with social media, which is far different in 2012 than it is today. Well, that became ×4, right? So it is exponential. So that mitigates the risk. Creating these communities, being part of this discussion, and hopefully connecting with each other, choosing who you want to work with. It is in your control who you want to work with. And that will mitigate the risk of being a freelance journalist. And if you do this well, creating your own community, as we're doing in this conference, then you have the seeds for your own success, focused on your own obsessions. Creating a community of freelance journalists is essential, not just for building your own networks, but you know this, because of distribution and reach. That is the part that leads to independence. And here I'm going to use my friend, the indomitable Carol Cadwalader, as an example. There's a reason why the reporter who broke the Cambridge Analytica scandal, perhaps the biggest story in the last few years, right, is a freelance journalist. She's not a tech reporter. She's not based in Silicon Valley. She's not part of any of the power structures. She had a different perspective of legality. And when I asked her why she thought she was the one to break the story, she said, I ignored the rules on what I should have been doing, and the paper wasn't able to tell me no because they don't control my time. Independent journalism is critical to our collective survival in every one of our countries and all around the world because power has gotten more powerful. Okay, so now let's talk about your survival. Even as you freelance for the news organizations trying to redefine their business models so they survive, I hope you're also building both your brand and your community. I mean, I really hate it when we refer to brand because journalists aren't commodities. We never had to sell ourselves during journalism's golden age. This is my 35th year as a journalist, right? And I grew up at a time when our work spoke for us. But today, the context is different. You have to choose what you will become an expert on to define what will give your work meaning. How do you hold power to account? Think about the form and the substance. What caters to your strengths as a reporter, as a journalist? The easy way, of course, and this one is there because there are lots of tools, right? Substack, Facebook is coming out with their newsletter. Yeah, we're frenemies, Facebook and I. Well, anyway, the easy way is you can create your own Substack. And within your circle, right, 12 people, you pull them together here, you build your community, you harness, you create your own infra in its own way, right? Your own processes. Stitch your communities together, then you can scale reach, leverage off each other exactly the same way the 12 of us did in Rappler in 2012. The problem, though, and this is a reality, that we are drowning in content. The very thing we create, right? The fire hose is gushing at us, and it doesn't distinguish between quality and crap. I mean, even worse, in Facebook's distribution, lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than facts, than journalism. Okay, so there's that. Understand also that every move that Facebook has made since the Cambridge Analytica erupted, since Carol broke the story, has only weakened news organizations. In 2018, Facebook changed its algorithms, emphasizing content from friends and family. Well, how did that translate to news organizations? That meant a drop for news groups of anywhere from 40 to 60% of their traffic. Just depended on which country you were in. So while Facebook says it wants to protect news, its actions show the opposite. Now, how do you use social media in a way that works for you, that protects you from attacks? Because that's the other thing. Did I mention a new UNESCO study that was released in May that says women journalists are attacked far more than men? In the Philippines, our data shows it's at least 10 times more than men. You create and build your journalism community, much like we built Rappler in 2012. Working together with other freelance journalists gives you the agility. That's critical, the agility to shift, the independence to pursue what holding power to account means, and then the protection of a group that you create yourself. Be purpose-driven to develop your audience, and don't get lost in the numbers, because that's the other part that these dashboards do, right? Our metric in Rappler is impact. How does it change our world? We can talk a little bit more later about how we define that metric. Everything you do, if you're effective, will redefine journalism. And again, I go back to Carol, who I recently interviewed in this program I call #Hold the Line. You know, it's a left brain, right brain program where I get to ask people why. I get to ask people the questions I wouldn't normally ask as a journalist. And that's the window that's open for us, right? So Carol, like Rappler, said she focuses on impact journalism with the mission of journalism. Sorry about that. With the mission of journalism front and center, holding power to account. She experimented with the Citizens. It's a group she formed to work with folks from a broad range of disciplines. So expand journalism's definition: science, academia, filmmaking, art, activism. And her goal was to super boost investigative journalism and bring it to different audiences. That's how we work together in the Real Facebook Oversight Board, her brainchild. And I'm thrilled to be part of that incredible group of people, along with the woman who coined the phrase surveillance capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff. This is exactly what Move PH, this is a civic engagement arm inside Rappler, does. We build communities of action because in the end, our goal is, Lars said it, he took all my lines. Our goal is to change our world for the better, right? That's why we're journalists. So it's both an exciting and dangerous time. You already know I could go to jail for doing what I'm doing, but I try not to focus on that. I just keep doing what I'm doing, and then here's the thing. Strangely, the best advice I can give you now seems counterintuitive. At a time when meaning has been atomized into meaninglessness, right? That's when meaning has been atomized into meaninglessness. It's a different time. So here are the things to sort out. Without meaning, right? When real connections are incredibly rare, you have to take another risk that I know you're strong enough to handle because you're freelance journalists, right? And that risk is really in two small words. I tried to tell this to my team and they reacted very, very strongly. Two words: be vulnerable. I think it begins there. As a person and as a journalist, you open yourself up to others, other views, other ways of doing things, other ways of seeing the word. I actually just said this the other day to my team. If what drives you is winning, then you're not listening. And that is incredibly critical to a journalist today, right? It's critical not just to journalism, but to our democracy. Being vulnerable is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up, to be honest, to be yourself when you can't control what happens next. That to me is real courage and the beginning of the real connections and the real networks and the real friendships that will make you succeed. More power to all of us. Thank you.
Hi, Maria. How are you? It's an honor being talking to you today. We have some questions from our audience. Let me ask you one that Nupur Sonar wrote. What were the initial challenges in harnessing citizen journalism and how did you overcome them?
So, we started in citizen journalism before, my gosh, it would have been 2007. So very early on, and I was heading the largest news group in the Philippines, and we pivoted, and I just said, we have to try this. And when we did, the initial challenges was creating a process, communicating what it is you're looking for. And then when you have these successes, you have to celebrate the wins. And one of the things I want to tell you about is how important it was because it was a direct link inside the military. In 2009, there was a massacre. 38 journalists were killed, probably the largest group of journalists killed in an election-related violence, and it happened in the Philippines. 58 people were killed that day. They just disappeared on their way to a pole. And then there was a backhoe where their bodies were buried in broad daylight. That's how impunity reigned in the Philippines, right? And what happened was the first photo, the first signal to us that something bad was happening came from a citizen journalist. And it turned out that that citizen journalist was a member of the military. So even when bad things happen, you create this funnel that would allow anyone. So, and this is where it becomes an individual battle for integrity. Anyone who wants to blow the whistle on things that they know are wrong. Okay, so that's sticks out in my mind. But here's the problem, of course, now is that you have to protect yourself against frauds. We didn't run the photo that citizen journalist sent us for almost 24 hours, and there was still no real photo coming from the site because it was so dangerous at that point in time. We were still the first to do it, but we had to verify. So verify. We had to verify that the van, there was a white high ace van, that it was actually part of the convoy. And then I think the last one is that don't treat citizen journalism as a one-off. Look at it as building your community. So you're an individual reporter, right? And this is more during the times when we weren't getting attacked and we weren't getting killed and people weren't as nasty. What I used to do all the time was every story I was working on, I would atomize it and I would ask my community, the community I'm building. And you can actually be more creative now, right? Maybe Substack is the way to do it. Maybe this newsletter, maybe it is just on your Twitter account, right? Twitter also allows newsletters now. But put some gates to protect yourself, and then verify. But the other part is you don't have to do it alone. And this is where we go back to James Suryaki's wisdom of the crowds. If you can do it with your community, it's so much better. Rappler survives because our community helped us crowdfund money for our legal fees. That's how important community is.
We have more questions for you, Maria. This is from Andreas. Andreas asks, when a journalist asks tough questions to the leader and it takes a response hate and prosecution. Yes,
we've been through it. We've been through 5 years of this, right? What do you do? The way I think about it is that it's like pollution. I can't do my job because that's the environment, but I'll keep doing my job, right? So what have we done in Rappler? We continue to hold power to account. We continue to expose. We do the investigative exclusives that show corruption, right? Every time that happens, something bad happens to me. I have 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years. I almost have to smile because it's like ridiculous, right? So I have 10 arrest warrants. I had up until less than a month ago, I had 9 active cases, and then one just disappeared. You know, the guy who filed it against me, the cyber libel case, just decided to drop it. And so now I have 8. There are 8 little Indians left. So I don't know, it's there. It's like a sword hanging over my head, but the goal is to stop me from working. And if I don't let it stop me, then it's not successful, right? I think that's the other part that I would say as freelance journalists, realize that you're going to need help. The reason why I get energy and courage is also from my team. There are 4 women founders of Rappler, and we're all in our 50s. We all grew up at journalism's golden age. And we can manage Rappler because we will run in 4 different directions. Without even having to talk, we know what to do when crisis hits. Find your friends like that. Who do you trust? Who do you want to work with? And not just rely on news organizations, I guess. This is what we forget, right? That the power begins with you, that you can actually create a Rappler. I'll tell you how much it cost us to do it, but you can now for significantly less because the infrastructure has already been created for you. We can talk about that more later. But I guess to answer Andreas's question, it is what it is. So we deal, right? I just handle.
We have another one from Jeremy. Maria, Jeremy asks, how can a freelance journalist defend him or herself if there is any backlash on any action being made, since freelance journalist is independent?
And that is why you must create your communities, right? You're part of this community now, but I never, when I was when I was with CNN for almost 20 years, I didn't realize how important CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, RSF, uh, Reporters Without Borders, the International Center for Journalists, there is now a greater role for these organizations, the press freedom organizations, because my God, a plane was hijacked to take a journalist off of it, right? Like, what world do we live in? So prepare for that. Even if you're a freelance, especially if you're a freelance journalist, right? Um, we can wait for this organization to do it, or you can begin to do it yourself. That was how I created Rappler. I think the best journalists in the Philippines are in Rappler. Sorry, sorry to other Filipino journalists, but my four co-founders were the best journalists that I knew, and because you choose people to work with who have the same values, who are strong, who are honest, who will keep you honest. I think that's the end. Once you create that community, it's there not just to amplify your ideas and your work, but also to help protect each other. Certainly, like I can email me and I can help you if you are in trouble. But the first step I still hope is that the organization you write that for will stand by you. In the case of Carol, again, I'll use her. In the case of Carol, the Guardian stood by all of the stories of Cambridge Analytica, but one of the lawsuits that was filed against her was about her TED talk. And that then meant that she had to deal with that herself. And you have to create a support group. I have a support group, and the support group isn't just Rappler. And I actually think we can help support each other.
We have one more question. I mean, we have many, but due to time, we can ask one more. Maria, this comes from our director, Adam Thomas. Adam asked, Maria, has your increased visibility over the past few years helped or hindered your role?
Helped. Has increased visibility helped. It's the Washington Post that said it, right? Democracy dies in darkness. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't shine the light. Look, I think in the Philippines, if you are a large news organization and your business is threatened and you have a lot of other businesses, intimidation may work, right? Because again, it goes down to that power and money thing. I mean, look at our largest newspaper, the Philippine Daily Inquirer. They didn't attack the journalists; they attacked the businesses of the owners, and that's one way, right? So the difference, I think, is that Rappler was created by journalists who don't have any other businesses. I always joke we should be more business minded, but we know enough to make our business model sustainable in this day and age, but no real interest in other businesses, right? This is what we do, it is journalism. And I hope that with the European Journalism Center, that events like this, that this will actually help. Sorry, I jumped to the old question, but I guess I'm saying that the only defense of a journalist is to shine the light. And a lot of people could actually just hammer you, trying to silence you. That's the goal of all of this, trying to make you afraid to speak. When that happens, go ask for help. Don't be silent. For me, the reason why we're still here and why I'm still talking to you is because I not only have a big mouth, but I kept talking. I kept pointing out every single instance of abuse of power, of violations of our Constitution, because impunity doesn't last forever. And I don't believe that the values of Filipinos have changed. We're one of the first signatories to the Universal Declaration of Human rights. And we will go right back to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, for this inspiring talk and for being today with us. And I mean, you inspire us because we need to continue to making a difference despite the challenges. Thank you so much again, Maria. Thank you, really. Next, we are delighted to welcome Fisayo Sujombo, an award-winning freelance investigative journalist and founder and editor of the Foundation for Investigative Journalism. Fisayo is better known for his undercover stories with which he exposes corruption and injustice. He will share his experience and tell us why freelancers are key for healthy democracies and the public debate. Welcome, Fisayo. Hi, Fisayo. Welcome. We cannot hear you. Today happened something with the sound. Can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me. I still cannot hear you. Okay, we're solving this. Yes, all good. We will wait.
Hi, Fisayo, welcome. I don't know if you can hear us clearly. I think the audio was okay. So we invite you to share your slides and, of course, start the conversation.
Something happened, Anna, with his sound.
I think now we can see your presentation and we can add it to the streaming. So we're ready to go, Fisayo. So whenever you're ready.
No. The thing is, like, Anna, we cannot hear him. Yeah.
But we're finding a solution. That's the good thing about the freelance journalist community. We are very resilient and we are going to always find a way to do it. So, Fisayo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Just to be sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Fisayo, we can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So I'll just share my screen on my PC and I'll talk on my audio. Thanks very much. It's an honor to be here. I'll do everything I can to stick to the time, which is supposed to be 20 minutes, to talk about freelance journalism, the importance of freelance journalists, and how their work is important for societies. There's so many problems that freelance journalists face. A lot of times they have big story ideas and then they are thinking about funding, and it's such a huge problem all over the world. But then on the flip side, there are two big benefits. One is that you have the freedom of story choice. Freelance journalists can sit down and say, this is the next story I want to do. I'm going to take 5 months to prepare for it, and the 6th month I'm going to go to the field. They have the benefit of the time, and then they choose, unlike when you are in newsrooms where a lot of factors influence stories that freelance journalists do. I'm going to just run through some of the things I've done in the last 2 years by virtue of being a freelance journalist. This is a 2018 story about corruption on Nigerian highways. What I did was drive the equivalent of a stolen vehicle. I drove it from Lagos to Lagos is Nigeria's commercial hub. I drove it to Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital. A journey of more than 2,600 kilometers. I passed through 86 checkpoints. and I drove the car from Abuja to Lagos and from Lagos back to Abuja. I wasn't found out by any security agents. There were policemen on the highway. There were officials of the Nigerian Customs Service. There were officials of um, uh, NDLEA, Nigeria Drug Law Enforcement Agencies. There were soldiers, the army. And it was an experience that showed me how cars get missing in Nigeria and they never get found. Because once they're on the highway, you pay a small bribe. Nobody checks your papers. Nobody checks if it's your car or not. Nobody checks your identity. You are given a free pass. The biggest of all is one I did in October 2019. As a matter of fact, this was a story idea I got back in 2017. I'd wanted to do this story for 3 years, but because I was a full-time employee, the opportunity wasn't there. I wasn't able to make out the time. Again, like I said, one of the benefits of freelance journalism is that time that it gives you. In 3 years as a fully employed employee, I couldn't make out the time required to go to the field. So I left a job in June, and then in July, I went to prison. What I did, I sat down with my cousin and planned as if I bought a car worth 2.8 million naira in Nigerian naira. I paid 500 and didn't pay 2.3 million, and started evading the seller of the car. And then, because I had heard that a lot of corruption and injustice were going in prison, my target, as a matter of fact, was the prison. The law in Nigeria says that if you pick up a suspect as a police station, if a court is within 40-kilometer radius of that police station, you arraign the person in court within 24 hours. If a court is more than 40 kilometers away, you arraign the person within 48 hours. If you are going to hold any suspect for more than 48 hours, you need a court order, But then, we planned, the police arrested me, thinking they were arresting the criminal, detained me. Instead of the maximum of 2 days, the police detained me for 5 days. So I was in the police cell for 5 days. I saw minors come into the cell and leave. I saw the conditions. From there, I was arraigned in court. In court officials were asking me to pay bribes. Prison officials in court, excuse me, were telling me that if I could pay them a bribe, when the court had ordered me to be remanded in prison, they told me that if I paid that bribe, I would sleep in my house that night. I would not get to prison. To show you how the criminal justice system is circumvented in Nigeria if you have money. But then, because my intention was to get to prison, I ended up not paying the bribe. They were telling me that if I had money, they would put me in special cells in prison. I wouldn't suffer. So effectively, people get sentenced to jail, but then they live almost a full life. Those were the things I found out because I had the time. From court, I was in prison. I was in prison for 8 days. So 2 weeks undercover, 5 in police cell, 8 days in prison. In prison, I found out that your records can be erased if you pay a bribe. You can have access to drugs. You can have access to sex. You live, apart from the everyday freedom that you lose, it's like life is the same for you. And it's also heartbreaking. But if I wasn't a freelance journalist, I doubt that any newspaper would have given me all that time to go. I spent 2 weeks on the field. When I got back, I had to see my physiotherapist. I had to see my doctor. I needed time to get over the trauma before I started putting pen to paper. It was already 2 months. And then I did writing for let's say, and so it was a story that got minimum of 3 months. And I had nothing else to attend to in that time. Again, another slide showing the prison angle of the story. There's drug abuse, there's sodomy, there's bribery, there's pimping. Once you have your money in a typical Nigerian prison, once you have your money, you are fine. So it looks to the complainants that justice has been served, but a lot of times, excuse me, the guilty party is practically just having fun in prison if that person has money. a slide showing how I shared my experiences, living with a cellmate that appeared to have run mad, how prison warders set me up, how after my release from prison, I was abducted by the police again. A lot of things going on in Nigerian prisons that I found out. Few months after, I went into a psychiatric hospital. I spent 10 days undercover, pretending to be a psychiatric patient. Someone is going to ask, how was that possible? That we were not found out. I went in like a drug abuse, like how do they say, people living with substance abuse. That's the cover under which I went, spoke with had a series of sessions with a psychiatric doctor who assured me that if I answered, he told me all the questions that would be asked, and he told me how the conclusions the doctors would reach and how to answer such all the questions in such a manner that they would feel I needed admission, but I did not need drugs and I did not need injections. I only needed psychotherapy. So I was right there for 10 days, and I experienced firsthand how a system that is supposed to take care of psychiatric patients is actually the ones frustrating them. Bed space is the corruption that goes into it. It's so hard to get bed space. When you do, the food in that place is terrible. And the annoying thing is that you take drugs from the mouth of patients and you give them food, but you give them food that people with irreversible mental disorder, the kind of food that they eat when left alone on the streets, that's the kind of food you give them, and you want them to recover, and that shouldn't be happening. Especially the hospital that is one of the most historic for psychiatric treatment in Nigeria. In those 10 days, I found out about staff shortage. I found out about ghost workers, people who just earn a salary for doing nothing, and the powers behind the corruption at the psychiatric hospital. As freelance journalists, one important advantage we have is that we are available for service to our country at short notice. In a full-time newsroom, a lot of factors come into play in deciding who does what story, who is available for what. But as a freelance journalist, something massive is happening. You can make yourself available for use by your country. This is a story about the end SARS protest. I'm sure a lot of listeners at one point or the other heard about the end SARS protest in Nigeria last year. Nigerians trooping to the streets to protest against police brutality. And it was a very organic protest. You couldn't say this was the leader. The government were shaking to their foundations. They could not find that one person to pin down and tell to go and call the protesters to order. It happened organically. It spread from state to state without necessarily one person being the one to do all the coordination. But guess what happened? On October 20, 2020, Nigerian soldiers went to the Lekki Plaza, the venue of the biggest gathering of protesters, and shot at them, killed some of them, injured some of them, and covered it up. And so it was a big deal in Nigeria. Did this massacre happen or not? Started working on the story in late October. It happened October 20, started working about a week or 8-9 days after. And up till the end of December, I couldn't say if there was a massacre or not. I started seeing traces of a massacre in January. A 3-part series. This first part highlighting the efforts that state agents made to clean up that massacre, to give people the impression that nobody died, And then another part in the series showing the names, the photos, the videos of protesters. So there are protesters whose names I had. There were some whose names I didn't have, but whose photos I had. There were some whose photos and names I didn't have, but whose videos I had. So it's like the closest attempt to naming the victims of that massacre. And this is the last part. By the way, there were also some who were missing. I think I featured 2 people who were last seen at the toll gate, but haven't been seen since then, because all first-hand eyewitnesses I spoke with told me the soldiers came in vans and moved bodies away. And then we thought if they indeed moved bodies away, we should be able to find people who were last seen at the toll gate but haven't been found since then. And I can tell you that I got to, just last night, I met a source who got 6. The government put in so much into covering it up, but bit by bit, the information, is getting out. Last part, focusing on survivors of the massacre, people who were shot and are alive to tell the story of how the Nigerian government, in a democracy, ordered soldiers, ordered men of the Nigerian army to go to the venue of a protest ground, to go to the venue of a protest and shoot at protesters and kill a number of them. You find insurgency in Nigeria's northeast. You find right now banditry is on the rise, especially in northern Nigeria, in other parts of Nigeria, in the southwest, and of course in the north. You have herdsmen terrorizing people, and the government has not been able to overpower them with the army. But when it comes to protest, it's easy for them to do, but without the opportunity of freelance journalism, government may actually have gotten away. So just my experience of how, as a freelance reporter, I use my work to hold the government to account, to expose corruption, to expose injustice, and some cases of power. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fisayo. We have a few questions in the live chat. So, Ankita Anat asks, considering the risk involved in such work, was wondering what Fisayo feels about collaborations, and asks, it is easier to take risks when working alone or easier to counter threats when working together?
I'll say that you need both. When you are working alone, it means that the risk of being given out by a third party is minimal. When you are alone and nobody knows your location, nobody can divulge it to anyone. But there are certain stories that can't be done alone. Otherwise, the fact that you are alone then gives you out. So you are going to prison. Nobody is coming to prison to check on you. You're going to the police undercover. They know that you didn't drop from heaven. You have friends and family. If nobody, no single person turns up at the police station, they start suspecting you. Can you have a suspect who doesn't have one single friend, one single family? So for the success of some investigations, you need people, you need a team. Without that team, you may not, your security may not be compromised, but then suspicion can happen on the field. But when you're working alone, the chance is absolutely remote that someone can give you out. That's the difference. So you need both.
We have time for another question, Fisayo, and it's Sedal Tobiri asks, what about how can we manage the risks?
The risk of undercover reporting, freelance investigative reporting, first of all, you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. A lot of, for the stories that I've done, people have said, oh, this guy is a daredevil journalist. This guy doesn't run from risk. This guy, but that's not what happened. While other people saw risks and ran away at the first time of asking, what I did was to stay back and analyze. Can risk A, what are the risks? List all of them one by one. Which one can be surmounted? So when you analyze, you know what can be surmounted. You move to the next stage and you say, if something goes wrong, what is the plan A? If this goes wrong, what is plan B? You know, it's about turning the story in your head a lot of times. If I'm at the police station and a policeman finds me out, what do I do? If my phone gives me out, what do I do? If someone visits me and the person gives me out, what do I do? You know, replaying many scenarios in your head, you know, way before you go to the field, which is why I always recommend that no story should be done in a hurry. have it in your head for months. So you turn it over and over and you replay all the possible scenarios and you have your answers for them.
Thank you, Fisayo. That's a really good advice. And thank you for being here, for joining us today, and sharing with us your experience and your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
Thank you very much, Fisayo, for this moment and for sharing your amazing experience with us, because we know that in the community there are a lot of investigative freelance journalists facing the same challenges and risks as you are doing. So thank you very much for this. And now it's time to move on and introduce you to our next speaker. Sophia Smith-Galler is an award winner, journalist, author, and filmmaker. She is the BBC first ever visual journalist in faith and ethics. She travels the world telling the stories, underreported stories. And she has developed a following of 250,000 followers on TikTok. That's why we're very happy to have you here, Sophia, in this session where she's going to tell us more about how freelancers can use this platform to engage with their audiences, to build trust, and to find and tell stories. So welcome, Sophia.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for having me. The caveat for the whole of my presentation is that I myself am not a freelance journalist. I am staff with the BBC. However, all of the TikToking that I do, and indeed quite a lot of the social media activity that I do, you know, and all the other platforms like Instagram and Twitter, I do that all in a pretty independent capacity. So I hope that some of my learnings will be relevant to everyone in the freelance community as well. So let's go. I'm going to talk today about how I use TikTok for my journalism. I do use TikTok personally as well, and we'll get onto that too. A little bit about me. Anna's just introduced me perfectly, but to give you a sense of my career background, I suppose, this is my second role with the BBC, and I've been there for about 3 years. But my first role was as a social media producer for BBC.com, where I would create Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram content for the BBC's feature websites, BBC Future and BBC Culture, as well as always writing articles, as well as always making video. Social media has been a part of my journalism from the very beginning. And that is how I was able to pivot to TikTok when TikTok came. The reason that I explored it as a platform was because my day job, visual journalist, is kind of just another word for video journalist. I saw this new video platform come along and I thought, oh, I better figure out how it works in case I do need to use it for my employer or indeed anyone else. And what began as a little experiment turned into something really magical. So what do I do on TikTok? For me, it's a mixture of the following two things, because I do use it personally as well as professionally. So in terms of what I use it for personally, I really approach TikTok as a content creator. So I will share things that I find interesting, news stories that I find interesting, or new facts that I find interests. And equally, I share a lot about music or languages, two passions of mine. So it really is a place for me to be myself. I also take part in trends, which is a really, really important part of the TikTok platform. Quite unique in that every day it really is it is a trendsetter and culture maker, and there'll be trends to take part in all the time. Some grow organically, some don't, but there are always ideas feeding in on how you can create content, which is what other platforms have generally lacked. So this is why TikTok is making more of us content creators, one could argue. And I spend a lot of time on there, just enjoying it as a consumer, watching other people's TikToks, commenting on their TikToks. I favorite lots of TikToks that I find really interesting and I go back to and I watch later, especially the more factual or informative ones. But you're all here to hear how I use it for journalism. I have done investigations on the app, looking into either the platform itself or particular users on there, and I continue to do so. I've used TikTok as a news gathering tool, finding stories, and I've used it as a promotional tool. So I've come up with TikToks to try and draw attention to work that I have done. And rather happily, I was mentioned in a select committee in the House of Lords about journalism innovation, and Professor Charlie Beckett very nicely said that I'm doing terrific, really clever stuff on TikTok. I do not think TikTok is the solution to the news media's problem, but it's a good example of her using the technology, and she has done it in an entrepreneurial, editorial way. And I completely agree with Charlie that I think, getting on TikTok isn't necessarily going to solve all our problems with engaging younger audiences or getting more eyeballs on your journalism. But it's a start, and it is an idea, and it's worked for me, and maybe it will work for others. I just want to give an example of a couple of the things that I've done on here. So last year, the BBC News theme went viral on social media, and I found this creator's TikTok, and I tweeted about it. It all went viral, and it turned into a news story in and of itself. I've made videos that kind of combine my specialism in religion and TikTok. So this is all about how a group of Jewish content creators use the app to tackle anti-Semitism on the app. I covered virtual pride, which was a TikTok first movement. This was an investigation that I did about a trend that was going viral, that was deeply colorist, and hadn't been taken down and was being seen by millions and millions of people. This is probably one of my proudest career achievements. I created what I endearingly call the TikTocumentary, but I created a TikTok podcast, I mean like a radio documentary, and it was also my first television documentary as well. And I explored how TikTok was influencing the US election. And out of it came these two exclusives that you can see on the left-hand side. So you can see that I found that TikTokers were being paid to create political ads, which is banned on the app, and also raises questions about how money is used in elections and not declared. And I also found, as you can see in the other story, that President Trump's campaign were covertly campaigning on TikTok while simultaneously trying to get the app banned. And I'm really proud that I found that story, all because I spend so much time on TikTok. I'm not a tech journalist, and I'm not an American political journalist, but I found that story. I'm really proud of that. For that TikTok documentary, I used a couple of new things that I hadn't seen any other journalists do before. So I used the duet feature on TikTok to Vox Pop. Vox Pop is something that any radio journalist or telejournalist knows that we've been doing for a really long time. But the duet feature allowed TikTokers who wanted to have something to say, offered them an arena with which to say it. And I would then use that in a television documentary. This here, Hey, I've Got a Story for You, was a kind of spoken word poem that I delivered all about my documentary that I had made, reaching 150,000 people. Crucially, that video spun itself onto the TikTok algorithm and found young Americans. That's all about this, about this election, and I wanted it to reach young Americans, first-time voters, and it did. And even my journalism managed to reach Donald Trump Jr. A lot of people might know me for my sea shanty about the Suez boat. That was a meeting of memes. That was a meeting of two worlds in which a news story met the meme of the sea shanty, which went viral on TikTok. And that's to date my most watched video, cumulatively between TikTok and then its version on Twitter and Instagram. I think over 6 million views. It got played on BBC Radio 1, on Greg James's morning show. It got me onto the front page of Egypt's most read newspaper. Kind of bonkers. And all it was about what was going on with the Ever Given to an audience who were relishing it. You couldn't get away from the Suez boat on TikTok at that point. the audiences were just crazy about it as a news story. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. How can I best serve my audience? And I came up with the sea shanty. Isn't TikTok just another social media platform? Well, it's got enormous potential for viral reach in a way that other accounts, other platforms do not necessarily have. Really, really high content density. And all that means is that in a 1-minute video, there's an awful lot packed in there, visually and information too. Low production value, a little unlike YouTube nowadays. You don't necessarily need all of the, the ring lights and the professional editing software to necessarily make TikToks. Of course, there are plenty of people who do use all of that, but you don't need it to go viral. There's a really high user base under 25. So think of TikTok being the app for Gen Z. Think of Instagram being more the app for millennials, and Facebook, again, particularly me thinking of a UK audience. This is what the case is. Globally, it might not be the case in your country. There's really different kind of penetration of different social media platforms. So my recommendation is you look at what's for your country and figure out what social media platform you should be spending the most time on. Really, really high comment value on TikTok. I get the best comments and best conversations in my TikTok comments compared to what goes on Facebook or Instagram or even Twitter oftentimes. And that's mainly because I don't know if it's to do with the age demographic, but I generally encounter far less hateful comments on TikTok as an app than I do other apps, which is interesting. And as I mentioned before, TikTok really is a culture maker through its trends, unlike other social media platforms. And the perfect example of that is if you've been on Instagram lately and looking at reels, you will find that half the reels are just TikToks that went viral 2 weeks ago. TikTok is the culture maker, and other apps are finding that they're just they're turning into simply just another place for people to post their TikToks rather than Instagram necessarily coming up with loads of trends. Where might TikTok not work for news? It is seriously time consuming, right? So would you be better off using your time on other social media platforms, or indeed other stories, other avenues of which to find stories that are better for your beat? Videos can be put under review or taken down if reported. This has happened to me, and it's happened to lots of journalists that I know. Both can take an indeterminate amount of time for them to be accepted back onto the platform, by which point you've lost engagement opportunities and the news event might have changed. So in terms of moderation, it can be a tricky beast to try and work with. So should you join TikTok? Well, all depends. And in my view, only if you think or agree with some of the following statements. I want more young people finding my journalism. I have 2 hours a day minimum to dedicate to scrolling and making content. I want to find out what young people are interested in. I want to speak directly to my audience and get their input in shaping my work. I'm happy showing off my personality and interests to complete strangers on the internet. I've got the support network around me if I go viral, and I've got the support network around me if I never go viral and it completely crushes my self-esteem. And I can't emphasize how important it is about the support network going viral. You might be going viral for, fantastic reasons, like, for example, my Egyptian sea shanty. The response I got was overwhelmingly positive. However, I also got a lot of trolling because of it. And I'm very grateful that I have people in the offline world who I can say, people sent me these nasty comments. And then they know to be like, are you okay, Sophia? And I don't think we talk about that enough. Certainly content creators, that there isn't much support for us generally. So it's really important for us to kind of make those support networks ourselves, because they're not going to be made for us. It is really time consuming. I spend hours a day on TikTok, and that's because I have, something I enjoy doing in my personal time. I don't actually factor it into my working day because I don't TikTok for my employer. And there are times, for example, I've been writing a book this year, and there have been times when I was writing that book that I just had to completely kind of just TikTok if I have time, but otherwise I can't do my kind of daily engagement on there, which is the kind of activity that will grow an account. So there are times where I've just completely prioritized and TikTok has not been the #1 priority. And I think having that kind of healthy attitude is what is going to keep you doing the right work at the right time for you, if that makes sense. Which journalists are on? If what I've said has piqued your interest, I really recommend following these accounts. Some of them are independent journalists, some of them work for a news publisher. All of them do something different. And if you follow all of them, you'll get a sense of the kind of content that their fans like, the kind of content that their fans kind of don't like. And that's how you learn how to TikTok. You see what works for other people, and you decide if it's something that you want to do yourself as well. Now, this is interesting because I was really trying to think, okay, so if I'm talking to lots of freelancers, let's figure out, let's talk a bit about if we can earn money off TikTok as well. I do not personally because of my job. However, if you're an independent journalist and you want to try and use TikTok to earn some money, you can join the Creator Fund. You'll need a minimum of 10,000 followers, as well as a certain threshold of engagement and views on your videos. But you need a serious number of views on your videos for that money to be like anything substantial. I've been following content creators who sometimes share how much they've earned in a month or so. And I remember one person had videos, like numerous videos of over 1 million views. And over like quite a long period of time, she'd earned $1,000, but it was like really quite a long period of time. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, considering how much time you spend on each TikTok, like there's no way that you could pivot to just earning money off TikTok is what I'm trying to say. And you've got to remember that you might get kicked out of the Creator Fund if you repeatedly produce content that violates community guidelines or is reported for doing so, even if it doesn't actually violate those guidelines. And if you're a journalist posting regularly about controversial news events, maybe there's a risk there, I'm not sure. The reality of TikToking as a journalist is that it does take up loads of my time. Daily output and planning is minimum 2 to 3 hours a day. Maintaining relationships by replying to comments is very time consuming. You do have to do a lot of mindful curation of the For You page to deliver you the kind of content that it is you want. And I would say there is a loss of privacy. This weekend, I went out both days. I was recognized both days. I was once followed off the street into the road where I lived because someone recognized me on TikTok. They're all things that might happen if you blab on there, and it's just about learning how to deal with all of that. And then I just thought I would end here on just some comments that I've got over time, and I would say that what TikTok has allowed is essentially kind of aggressive proximity with my followers. It's been a way that I've been able to show that I'm not simply a very distant sort of austere journalist. I am someone who really wants to engage with people my age and younger. I want my journalism to be relatable and make a difference. And I want to make sure that people feel if they have a story, they feel like they can come to me and talk to me about it. And that has happened. That's happened numerous times. The book that I've been writing this year, which is all about exploring and debunking virginity and other cultural myths that we hold about sex around the world. That book would have been impossible to write if people, complete strangers on the internet, didn't feel safe enough to talk to me about really intimate things in their life that they've probably never even spoken about with many people in their, physical worlds. Maybe their sexual partner, but otherwise they might not even share this information with them, but they will share it with a journalist that they know off TikTok. And that has made writing the book a real joy. And additionally, it's really added, I think, to the kind of people that I speak to in my BBC reporting as well. So yeah, it can pay. it's a lot I would add, is that I would never be able to use TikTok alone. For me, I really use a whole ecosystem of different social media platforms. And at the moment, there is a real kind of appetite and mystery and curiosity about TikTok because so many people are still finding it really hard to crack. Hence why I'm doing a talk. I've been asked to do a talk today about TikTok. It's still mystifying people. People still aren't completely sure about whether to go on there or not. And what I would say is, if you want to go on there, you can give it a go, but never forget that we have. It's really important, essentially, to use lots of social media platforms in conjunction with each other to get the best, the greatest, widest, and most interesting pools of information. So yeah, I'm now ready to answer any questions if anyone has them. Shall I stop sharing my presentation or shall I leave this up?
You can stop sharing it if you want.
Great.
But it's fine. I can see you here and you have so many questions, Sophia. First of all, hi, and thank you so much for being with us. Let me ask you one question that Jeremy and Pumbia asked. That is about how to identify fake news. So Pumbi asks, hi Sophia, could you expand on using TikTok as a news gathering tool, more specifically filtering out fake leads, given that the platform is much more flooded with content as compared to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter?
Well, if you're news gathering, that's about, I would just say that's about using your news sense. Like how do you spot fake news on other platforms as well, as you've probably been doing for a really long time on Twitter and Facebook? You just address all of the same principles. You look at the content and you try and you figure out, is this legit? What is their source? And that's what I do. I just apply the same principles that I apply to any social platform, really. I wouldn't say there's anything I do that's TikTok specific.
There is another question from S. McGarry. I'd like to ask, how do you avoid creating unintended bias, especially with this younger audience, just thinking of the anti-Trump story, then being followed by Trump Jr., etc.?
Well, I don't see it. I would debate it creating unintended bias. I created a news story. I found a news story rather, and I told it. There's certainly plenty of TikTok creators who were commenting the TikToks I was making around that, really surprised and unhappy that people that they were huge fans of were being paid to create content like this. And I don't mean that in terms of who the content was attacking or, promoting. Simply the idea that they would accept money for political ads was something that they found disturbing because they weren't declaring it. That's the whole point. People were not being transparent about it. And the reason they weren't being transparent was because if you are transparent, you get into trouble for it. And I think a lot of the people on TikTok understand that is problematic, this lack of transparency in politics and social media. But ultimately, you can't control, you do a news story, you can't control how people receive it. Ultimately, it's a neutral product that we made.
We have one more question, Sophia, from Jessica. Jessica asks, how many of your TikTok audience members can go on to look further into news articles to read deeper into the topic at hand?
I mean, I wouldn't know, but I do know that in terms of feedback I received, I know that a lot of people found my content on TikTok, consumed it, and then messaged me on Instagram about it, because on TikTok you can't message people who don't follow you back, whereas Instagram you can. And that's where I'd get a lot of feedback about content that I made, and it's all because they would have originally found me on TikTok. And secondly, what I do get to see how many people view my profile and are exposed to the link in my bio. And there is every month, that is thousands of people. And if I have a viral video, it's hundreds of thousands. So that gives me a sense of how many eyeballs I get. my best, well, in my bio, I've seen that it gets loads of hits if I include it. So yeah, but I think what you're probably pointing to there is the idea that social media is only about getting more page views on the original news site. And I think increasingly, I have long seen social media as a distribution model. There are a number of news outlets who refuse to see it as that and would much rather just see it as, no, this is a place where we can get more eyeballs back on our website. Is that the future of news? Is that the future of how we reach younger audiences? I don't have the answer to that, but that's what I would suggest we all think about, how we see social media and its relationship with our news sites.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much for being here today and for your presentation.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sophia, for this great presentation. And during the next days, we're going to have sessions on different platforms, Instagram and Twitter. And the idea is that us, as freelancers, we realize which one of these platforms makes more sense according to our personality, our work style, because it is not needed to have presence in all the platforms all the time. It is impossible, but then we can make the best with the ones that we consider it makes sense to use. So thank you very much for this. And now, before we move on and introduce our speaker for data journalism, I would like to invite Adam Thomas, Director of the European Journalism Center, who has a special message for the community.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. As many of you know, the European Journalism Centre has empowered thousands of journalists just like you to reinvent their careers, their journalism, and their newsrooms since 1992 now. Events like this and the impact they create is why we do what we do. And that's why today, right now, at the Assembly, we are launching the European Journalism Collective. It's a community of journalists who are supporting the EJC and each other. It's a community of journalists who are helping us take our work to the next level. From €5 a month, you can join the collective and help the EJC continue to fund journalism on underreported topics, produce free journalism events like this, and develop new grants programs. That helps us to offer our support to those who need it most: recent graduates, freelancers, journalists looking for work, journalists from marginalized backgrounds, journalists from countries experiencing oppression, so that we are able to support a whole bunch of people that otherwise normally we wouldn't be able to reach. Joining the collective also gets you exclusive benefits and rewards. You get access to our Discord channel. You get to join virtual monthly meetups to connect with other journalists. You receive the collective newsletter in your inbox, and you also get exclusive discounts on journalism productivity and privacy tools. So if you're as passionate about the future journalism as we are, please donate and join the collective. You just have to head to collective.ejc.net and you'll find out more about it there. One final thing before I go. This is one of my last contributions as the EJC director. I will leave the organization in 3 weeks, and I leave it in very safe hands with Lars, the new director who you met at the beginning of this conference. I've been lucky enough to meet so many of you, I think in person, but also online, of course, over the last year and a half. And I just wanted to say a personal thanks for the incredible work that you do as freelancers. I really hope that we get to meet each other again in person soon. I couldn't be prouder of this organization and this team. So it seems fitting to leave you with a few words from them, and I hope to see you soon.
Labdien. Buenos días. Buenos días.
Hi. Hello.
This is the European Journalism Center.
Since 1992,
We've been helping journalists all over Europe.
Now we ask for your support.
Join the European Journalism Collective.
And with a small donation, you can help us remain independent and sustainable.
So we can continue supporting journalists just like you.
And do even more.
And do even more. And do even more.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam, for this invitation to continue working together to build resilience in journalism. And now, to tell us more about data-driven human rights storytelling, we want to invite Data for Change's director, Bronwyn Robertson. Data for Change connects journalists, data scientists, designers, and technologists with human rights organizations to collaborate on data-driven projects that forge real change and have a lasting impact. Bronwyn will provide us with tips to create powerful storytelling projects. Welcome, Bronwyn.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today and for the wonderful introduction. I've been following on the live stream and just jumped over into the backstage, and I'm really looking forward to giving this talk today. So I should also preface my talk with the caveat that I'm not a journalist, but today we've got an exclusive highlights reel from some of the top journalists in our network, giving you their top data journalism tips. So hopefully that will sort of answer some of the questions you might have. My name's Bronwyn. I'm the Executive Director of Data for Change. My background is in research and advocacy, and in a past life, I wrote a book about underground rock music in Iran. Before we set up Data for Change, our co-founder and head of operations, Stina Backer, worked as a journalist for the BBC, The Independent, and CNN. So it's pretty safe to say that storytelling has always been at the heart of what we do. And so today I'll show you just how important numbers and narratives are to our work. And then at the end, we'll finish up with the Q&A, but don't be shy. By now, I'm sure that our head of design, Michael Brenner, will have introduced himself to you in the chat on the YouTube live stream. So go ahead and ask some questions and engage with him on the side, and then we can check in with each other at the end. From our tiny but mighty headquarters in London, we support a global network of grassroots organizations, human rights defenders, data researchers, data scientists, journalists, storytellers, hackers, hacks, web developers, and designers that spans more than 90 countries. And since we first started in 2014, we've designed, developed, and launched more than 50 data-driven campaigns, projects, and stories aimed at changing how people think about and engage with some of the world's most important issues. And so we've built up our profile in the journalism, design, and tech communities by hosting immersive in-person co-creation sprints. And they're kind of like summer camps on steroids. And so far we've held sprints in the UK, Lebanon, Uganda, Jordan, Estonia, and Kenya. But of course, during the pandemic, like everyone else, we've had to shift our work online. And we've tried to keep the spirit of what we do alive and kicking in the meantime. And for each project that we work on, we start by curating a multidisciplinary team of individuals from all around the world, and then we match them up with organizations that are driving forward positive change, both in and for their communities. And together they co-create data-driven projects that forge change with lasting impact. And so those data-driven projects take a variety of shapes and forms. I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of some of our favorite projects from over the years. And sometimes you'll see that data is at the forefront of the final product, but other times it influences the approach we take. And so when putting together this talk, we were looking at the fact that these data projects can kind of be grouped into three different categories. We have those that aim to inform, those that provide an opportunity for people to explore data, and those that aim to inspire. And so the first set of projects aim to inform by using multimedia data storytelling to help audiences gain a new or a better understanding of misrepresented or underrepresented topics. Like this project, which uses data from the Center for Human Rights and Policy Studies survey about gender-based violence across 3 low-income local informal settlements in Nakuru County in Kenya. They administered the survey to nearly 2,000 people, and the survey results showed that only 1 in 20 women who are raped report that crime to the police. So after uncovering that insight in the data, the Center for Human Rights and Policy Studies started working to dig deeper in the data to understand why that was the case, and as a result, started working then to advocate for more specially trained female police officers stationed at every gender desk in every local police station. And this is a project we produced in partnership with the Yemen Peace Project, and it sought to inform readers of the human cost of US support for the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen. The data we were working with, so the Yemen Data Project had logged 44,000 airstrikes between March 2015 and October 2018. To put that into perspective, that's an average of 32.8 airstrikes per day across that period. The story package, which we produced using a platform called Shorthand, includes videos, photos, interviews. We took before and after aerial images from the Google Earth satellite, and we also embedded Tableau dashboards of the data into the story. And one of the great things about this story was that at the end, it included a script template that US-based readers could use to call their senators and ask them to support the Senate Joint Resolution number 54, which aimed to force the president to withdraw all US forces involved in the conflict. And that resolution was approved by a vote of 56 to 41 in December 2018. So the next type of project that I'd like to show you are the projects that give people opportunities to explore and to engage with data sets. And that means that they can extract their own insights, find their own stories in some sense, and also then to draw their own conclusions. This project is called Uproar Tools, and it's powered by more than 80,000 rows of data taken from the United Nations. And with that data, we created a set of tools that gives human rights defenders these kind of supercharged insights to help them target their lobbying and advocacy more effectively. The tools help people decide who to approach and also how to communicate effectively with them. It supports sort of teaching around the very specific language that the United Nations speaks, but it presents it in a very user-friendly way and really humanizes the data. And in terms of telling powerful stories with data, making sure that the human aspect of data is at the forefront is one of the kind of key aspects. And so exploratory data projects like Uproar Tools are really about putting the power back in the hands of users. And a project like this contains countless stories that are then waiting to be discovered. And this project, Perceiving Yemen, in addition to helping users explore the data, it also provides a way for researchers and journalists working at the Yemen Polling Center to capture new data for their reports in a far less risky way. So the platform itself presents data collected from more than 5,000 Yemenis about their media consumption habits, the security situation, and their living conditions. But the final project isn't just a website, it's a system of Wi-Fi hubs that can also collect survey response data and transmit it back to the organization's home base. And you'll probably have gathered by now that even though I've tried to categorize our projects neatly into 3 groups, that there's considerable overlap. But I'm going to stick with it anyway, because the groups of 3 seem to be easier to remember. So the last type of project that I'd like to show you are our Inspire projects. And these aim to change government policies or practices, social norms and perceptions. And they usually have a specific call to action or aim to use data to persuade people to take a specific action. This is one of those projects. It's called Hear the Blind Spot. It's a data sonification. That means as well as visualizing data in the form of line charts, we've also created an audio track that presents the data in an audio format. And it was created in partnership with an Ethiopian charity called Together that supports people with visual impairments to access technology and information. The data project is a story narrated by Desta. She's a fictional character, and she tells the story of Ethiopia through her lifetime using the sonified data that is performed on a flute. And the package for this story includes downloadable sheet music and scripts in Amharic, English, and Braille, so that the story can be performed live in schools and at community events. One of the other kind of key factors about data visualization and data storytelling is that often people are really put off by statistics and numbers because they think that it has to be really complicated or complex, or that you need a deep understanding of mathematics to kind of engage with it. And I think that, you know, if that's the case, then what you're presenting is too complicated. From our perspective, using numbers and narratives together should help kind of simplify and make a story more powerful. And that's especially the case with this project, which we created in partnership with Digital Shelter. They're a Somali organization. Without Fear is a campaign that aims to create open, safe, and inclusive online spaces free of harassment. The project was created after Digital Shelter surveyed Somali women, and a third of them said that they spend less time on social media due to the harassment that they've received. In addition to a free downloadable digital security checkup calendar, my favorite part of this campaign is actually an audio-visual poem that was inspired by the data and written by a Somali poet called Zahara Muhammad. In Jordan, 14% of all marriages involve a girl under the age of 18. So for A Bride with a Doll, we worked with Arab women organization to create an interactive, data-led, but offline experience that can be shared between mothers and daughters. The outcome is a series of posters, social media assets, and the kind of feature piece of this is a storybook about a 14-year-old girl who's forced to marry, and the physical, emotional, and economic consequences of that early marriage. The book can be read from front to back or back to front, with one direction of the story telling the story of the girl and the other telling the story of the mother. So even though all of these projects are different in their approach and execution, they all began with a seed of an idea that was planted by data. And they all rely on storytelling in one way or another to make that data come alive. And so to create these projects, we really rely on people like you, those in the field of data, journalism, design, and technology, to collaborate on these projects. At a minimum, each Data for Change team has a designer, a data researcher or data scientist, a web developer, and a journalist or data journalist. So you might be wondering how we fit all of the pieces of a dream data project team together. We actually have an in-house joke that the typical team for a Data for Change project actually has to be as atypical as possible. And for all of our in-person sprints, we hold open calls, which we promote on our website and our social media pages. And just to give you an idea, around 400 people usually apply for the 20 spots, so it is quite competitive. And it takes a lot of time and consideration then for our review panel to really carefully curate a sprint team for one of our events. So how do we find our dream teams, and what are we looking for in our storytellers? Well, there's some good news is that we've shifted our work online like everyone else during the pandemic, and that means we're taking a slightly different approach at the moment. We've just closed an open call for data associates to join us in part-time paid positions on new data storytelling projects. So a top tip is to keep your eyes on our Twitter feed, as we'll be posting a call for journalists and storytellers very soon. Who will we be looking for? As long as you're a great storyteller and you know how to ask the right questions, then you're the type of journalist we want to apply to participate in a Data for Change team. If you identify as a data journalist, then that's great. Knowing your way around a pivot table or a spreadsheet is always a bonus. If you've got a programming language up your sleeve, then you're well on your way to being the type of multi-skilled superstar that we're looking for. But if not, as long as you're a whiz with words and you can write, edit, and produce great content for a range of audiences and platforms, then you're a really good match. But above all, you need to be able to take really complex information and work it into a simple story that is compelling and easily understood. So as I mentioned at the beginning, because I'm not a journalist and exclusive for this talk, we gathered together some of the top journalists from our network around the world to share their data journalism top tips. And whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, I hope these tips resonate with you as they should with anyone who's pursuing the stories behind the statistics.
Hi, I'm Christine Zong, Financial Times. Here are my 3 top tips. 1, have an idea of what you're looking for. Coming up with a theory to test before digging around the data is a good way to start. 2, don't lose sight of the story when crunching the numbers. It's not about the complexity of your analysis. It's about the strength of your results and why they matter. 3, work on a passion project involving data. You learn more and quicker when you're working on stuff that you care about.
Tips on working with data. Number 1, give it time. You need time to find the data, scrape it, clean it, analyze it, and then communicate it. There's no way around this one, but it is worth it. Number 2, the data is out there. Coming from the African continent, we are not known for documentation, but you'd be amazed at how much data is out there and you can use. So just know where to search, find the doors to knock on, and keep knocking until you get what you need.
Working with data can be intimidating, but it's a really important and insightful way to see how systems work. So here are my 3 tips. First of all, think at the unit of the person. It can be hard to think about what you might want in a database or what numbers you want to look at, but think about how does someone engage with a system? What information do they fill in when they get a service? What portal do they use? And that can help you build out your questions. Second, question data and be skeptical of data just like you would of a comment from a government agency. A lot of the time, the numbers that are given to you are not always going to be the full story. So ask those hard questions. And third, in both those processes, trial and error is okay. You might not always find what you need in the first database you request, or it might take 10 queries to see the information you're looking for and make sure it's accurate. But I think that's really part of the process. And I think that can be hard when just starting out, but is also a really interesting component of it. Good luck.
I think my main top tip for people who want to work in data journalism is essentially to come up with ideas. You know, you can be the best coder, you know, have the best data journalism skills in the world, but ultimately, if you don't have ideas for building stories, it doesn't really matter. It's just simply a means to an end, but you don't know what the end is. So I think the most important thing when it comes to data journalism is basically being able to look at a data set and having ideas of what to do with that data set, you know, coming up with story ideas, different ways of telling that story, and then being able to think about ways to deliver that story.
Hi, I'm Miriam. If you're a journalist who wants to work with data, my top tip is to learn a programming language like R or Python. It can be a steep learning curve if you're new to programming, but it's totally worth the time invested. You can do so much more with your data than you can in spreadsheets, and much faster. You can work with bigger data sets, you can make almost any kind of chart, and you can also share your code with other people so that they can reproduce it and they can build on it.
Be data informed, not data led. This means that data tells you something, but not everything. It's up to you to find out what's missing and why. Even a reputable source of data can be wrong or incomplete. Your work as a journalist is to be accurate, fair, factual, and to find out the truth, whatever format it has been saved as.
Yeah, what really resonates with me there is Dickens, who said you have to find out what's missing and why, and Emma, who says that the data is out there, you just have to keep knocking until you get what you need. In case you just can't wait to get started, these are some of our favorite and most used tools. Shorthand, a no-code platform that provides a visually compelling and easy-to-use framework for creating multimedia scrolly stories. And we used Shorthand for the projects that we shared in the Inform category. Flourish is a super high-powered and very customizable data visualization tool. Raw graphs, we use this for exploring raw data and finding visual patterns and trends. And Infogram is great for producing infographics and data visualizations, either for embedding on websites or for sharing on social media with kind of interactive components. And if you're just starting out, we've also got a free open source self-study course called Data Basics, which you can take online. And Michael's just messaged me to say that the security settings in the live chat mean that we can't post links. So what we'll do, if you follow us on Twitter, it's @DataForChange. We'll post a link to our Notion after this talk, and we'll have all of the links that we've mentioned there in case you want to check them out. So that brings me to the end of my talk, and I'll stop sharing my screen now so that we can go over and have some Q&A if there are any questions.
Hi, Robin. Yes, we have some questions for you. I will start with Jeremy. Jeremy asks you, what are some challenges you face with data, narrative or digital or visual media?
Oh, that's a big question. There are some of the challenges. Well, I think I can start by saying like one of the biggest challenges is like, even though Dickens was saying, you know, you have to find out what's missing and why, and Emma's saying that the data is out there, you just have to keep knocking until you find it, is that is a big challenge. So you might have a question, you might think that the data should be there and it might not be, despite how much you look. You might have to create a new data set by scraping some unstructured information online. What we tend to do is that we start with a data set and let that inform the story, rather than starting with a story and trying to find data that kind of gives evidence or weight to the story, which might be a different approach. But because we're usually working with civil society organizations that work on a particular theme, they often either have data or we support them to collect data, and then we use that as a jumping off point. So we find the story in the data rather than finding the data to fit the story.
We have another question from Itedal. Itedal asks, at the time of the great flow of information and its contradiction at the same time, how can the information be revised and become objective and reliable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If I understand it correctly, is it kind of like around maybe how that something kind of goes out of date because data is changing and information is changing? If that's the case, with the example like the Uproar Tools platform that we shared, that platform actually connects to an API of a United Nations website and regularly calls that website for updated data. So that it's there. But other times we always have to add the kind of caveat that this is a snapshot, it's a story, it was a moment in time, I guess, just like any other journalistic piece or story. It's telling a story of a particular moment in time, and sometimes that does go out of date very quickly. Yeah.
We have one question more from Sebastian. Sebastian asks, what role do you see your data technology play in the future journalism landscape?
That's also a good question, but as a non-journalist, I think I struggle to answer that. And also, I'm curious to know what, and it's difficult when we can't have a conversation about it, but what you mean by data technology. If you mean sort of like data storytelling or visual storytelling, I'm hoping that visual storytelling becomes even more of a part of journalism than it is at the moment. I think that there's a sort of power as well in independent journalism, civic journalism, in being able to tell stories. And that's one of the things that we're really striving to do at Data for Change, is to empower civil society organizations with the kind of tools that they need to be able to tell their own stories, even if that is with the support and partnership of journalists and designers, but that they have the power to tell their own stories.
We have one question more. What are the main data sources?
That's a good question. If you follow us on Twitter, when we post the Notion link, we can put a few in there. There's a lot of really, really good open data sources out there. The Data Basics course that we'll share the link to actually has a really great kind of checklist in it for vetting open source data. And it's really important that you kind of go through that process when you use a data source to kind of make sure that it is as sound as possible as a source. But we use a lot of UN data, and there's a bunch of portals like the World Bank that you can get kind of demographic data. But it really does depend on the theme that you're interested in. One of my favorite data sets, there's an organization called ACLED, and they have a really great data set on sort of conflict location and migration data. So we'll share the link with that one as well. There's a lot of stuff to play around with in terms of practicing data visualization and data storytelling if it's something you're interested in getting into.
Thank you so much, Bronwen. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your experience and your knowledge about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It's great to be a part of it.
So thank you everyone for joining this first part of the first day of the Freelance Journalist Empowerment Conference. And I think it's time for a break, and maybe we're gonna have 10 minutes. We can have these 10 minutes to go for a cup of coffee, a glass of water, and stretch our legs. Before we leave, we remind you that we would love to have your support if you like our work. So please feel free to visit our collective website and explore all our opportunities. So thank you very much, and see you in 10 minutes.
Wild that things aren't going my way, 'cause that would be boring. Spend my last cent on cheese and champagne. What a wonderful morning. Never mind, she declined to the first date. It was only on my birthday. Never mind all the lines on the highway. Give me time to reflect a bit, 'cause I'm just having a good day. Having a good day. Having a real good morning. I'm just having a good day. Having a good day. Having a real good morning. Real good morning. Real good morning. I guess that things can only get better from here, but sometimes I wonder, I might have met the love of my life, but I lost a number. Never mind, she declined to the first date. I went to Vegas with a roommate. Never mind all the lines on the highway. I aim to misbehave, 'cause I'm just having a good day. Having a good day. Having a real good morning. I'm just having a good day. Having a good day. Having a real good morning. I'm just having a good time. Having a bad day, yeah. A real good morning. A real good morning. A real good morning. I'm just
Okay, you tell me when.
You're live.
Hello and welcome back. We hope you had a nice break, and now it's time for the panel of the day. Effective pitches persuade editors with stories that make a difference. Pitching can be tricky, challenging, and sometimes frustrating, but the reality is that editors receive dozens and dozens of pitches every day. So you need to stand out among the crowd. But how to do it? How to create a pitch that is going to make editors fall in love with? To do so, we have a special panel, and we want to invite Abigail Edge, a freelance journalist and author, who will be moderating this conversation, and our panelists, Josephine Smith, Executive Editor of The New Humanitarian, Lola Garcia Ajofrin, Senior Journalist from Outriders, and Lola Hierro, writer and editor at Planeta Futuro El País. Welcome all.
Thanks, Anna. I'm really excited for today. We don't have much time, so I want to get straight into it. Just checking I'm not on mute. No, good. So we're going to start off today's session with some presentations from our panelists, and then there'll be some time for questions at the end. Lola G, shall we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, hello. So my name is Lola Garcia Ajofrin from Outriders. We do innovative journalism, and we cover global issues. So let us show you what we do.
Yeah, you're ready. Is that over? Yeah.
While that's loading, Lola, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what Outriders does?
Yeah, sure. So who are we? We are Outriders, a non-profit newsroom based in Poland. And we work with international team of reporters in different countries. What we do, we cover global issues with a local impact. But what we do different, we do traditional journalism, but we use an innovative format or approach. We do interactive stories, cross-border stories, comics, news game. This is a news game that we did with the strategies to the COVID-19. This is a diary in the north of Syria that we did by WhatsApp. And we work with different visual storytellers, journalists, photographers, filmmakers, illustrators. We have a section about power, which is focused on climate change. And what we look for freelancer is especially a solution journalism approach. So we will talk more about it later, but you can see here our details on how we would like that you send us a pitch, but this is what we do here.
There we go. Oh, I can see your presentation now, Lola. It's come up.
Yeah, and maybe Lola, I don't know if you can hear me, but we can stream the video from the studio.
Yeah, now you should see everything, okay?
I think we can do it. So yeah, now we can see the video together.
I can see it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so so this is what we do in Innovative Stories. We cover global issues with different formats. We try to do traditional journalism as we did always, but we do it in an innovative way, using comic, interactive stories, cross-border news games. And we have a special focus on solution journalism approach. Instead of covering just the challenges, we like to cover the solution approach to these challenges. This is the people that we work in Outriders, and we have reporters in different countries. Right now, Fatima is working in a story in Afghanistan. Luis is working in Kenya in a story. So we like to work with local reporters, and we work with different visual storytellers. Designers work with developers, with photographers. Currently, for instance, we are working in a series of postcards, and we are working with watercolorist painting. So we write the stories, and they paint with watercolor these stories. So we try to combine different formats. And we especially focus on environment. So for those who want to pitch a story, as I said, we especially focus on solution approach, and we are open to receive some pitch about climate change and different strategies to combat it. I don't know if you would like me to explain a little bit more on how to work with Freelancer, or you prefer to
Yeah, you've got some information on there already. You could go over that briefly and then we can discuss it in a bit more detail when we come to the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so shall we move on to the next presentation then? I was expecting Chaku to be in the show, but he's not here. I've just seen a message to say that he can't make it today. Maybe we'll be able to get some information on how you can pitch BBC Global News over email, and we can post that to the EJC website afterwards. So let's move on. Let's hear from Lola H. and see your presentation, and then if you've got any questions for either of the Lolas, you can ask them after the presentations.
Hello there. Hello, everybody. I am Lola H. Lola Hierro from El País newspaper. El País is a major Spanish newspaper in the world, and I belong to the section Planeta Futuro. It is a project that we started in 2014 together with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we have around 3 million unique visitors each month. We are a proud team of 5 women in the newsroom. And we work around with more than 300 contributors around the world in every country. I'm going to share my screen to show you how Planeta Futuro looks like. Okay. Okay, let me find it. Yeah, here it is. This is Planeta Futuro. Today we are opening with a report about the Nyarongo volcano in Congo. And this is how we work. We are focused in the Sustainable Development Goals, all of them, because our mission is to strengthen the coverage of this, the 2030 agenda, especially in Spanish language. Okay. Anyway, our main language is Spanish, but many of our articles are translated into English or Portuguese because we have many readers in Latin America and, of course, Brazil. Talking about the development goals, we are especially focused in everything related to end of poverty, childhood, education, women's rights, and global health, especially HIV, malaria, and TB, and also neglected tropical diseases. What else? We work both with traditional formats of journalism, report, photo galleries, etc. But we try to use also innovative formats like this one. This is a sample of a podcast that we are running since October last year, where we are showing the languages, the African languages that can be listened in Spanish, in Spain, sorry. We are working with African people living in Spain. We make interviews with them, and they speak in their mother tongue and explain us how they use it and everything. This is a feature that we have run from the newsroom. Also, this is a special coverage that we worked for a whole year, 1 year. In Senegal, we were explaining how the life in a town called St. Louis is regarding every aspect you can imagine. But then we also work with special features from contributors, like this one, for instance, about the big Virunga National Park in Congo. So this is what we mainly do. I would like to add that we love working with freelancers and contributors because we are only 5 in the newsroom, and we love to get pitches and to publish them. So this is all from me.
Great. So you can expect lots of pitches after this session then, hopefully. Great. And then Josephine, last but not least, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Josephine Schmidt. I'm the executive editor of the New Humanitarian, and I see that our homepage was shared, which is great. I invite all of you to explore the site while I speak. I will not be insulted if you're scrolling. You can find us at thenewhumanitarian.org. We are a not-for-profit newsroom covering humanitarian crises around the world and across the crisis continuum. So what that means is that we're there there on the ground, long before and long after the mainstream media arrives and leaves with the breaking story. So we cover the path out of war and toward peace, as well as the path toward war. We cover efforts to build resiliency, as well as the events and trends that threaten that resiliency for communities that are in the midst of political or economic upheaval or experiencing the impacts of climate change. We examine the needs at the heart of crises and also ways to alleviate those needs. We were founded within the UN in 1995 in the aftermath of the Rwanda genocide, and out of the conviction that fair, unbiased, on-the-ground reporting and consistent media attention could perhaps have helped mitigate or even prevent that disaster and certainly future disasters of such magnitude. We're now we're now completely independent. We're grant funded. We spun out of the UN more than 6 years ago with the determination to continue to report on crises that are largely undercovered by the mainstream media and to represent the voices of often marginalized groups within those crises. And also to serve as a watchdog over the multi-billion-dollar, largely taxpayer-funded humanitarian sector. So our mission is to inform humanitarian response and provide information that can be used to improve the lives of those living at the heart of humanitarian crises. So that's everyone from individuals and communities that have been upended by conflict, to the impacts of climate change, to environmental hazards brought about by storms or earthquakes. If you take a look at our homepage, you'll see our coverage areas are listed: aid and policy, conflict, environment, and disasters, migration. What that means is that our coverage may include, as it has over the last week, stories on everything from the repatriation of Iraqis from Syria's Al-Hol camp, to how monsoon and conflict are compounding Myanmar's post-coup food crisis, to how civil society peace activists in Cameroon are trying to end the conflict in the Anglophone region of that country. Today, we're publishing a piece on refugee access to COVID vaccines. Our reporting gives insight to policymakers, aid workers on the ground, and others who want to make the world more humane. We're a niche newsroom. Our audience is situated within the humanitarian sector. Our coverage is often travels to a very wide mainstream audience. To help that along, we're a big believer in collaborations. Recently, we've worked with Thomson Reuters, with Al Jazeera. We're based in Geneva, which is a hub for humanitarian organizations and the humanitarian operations of the UN. Though our small newsroom of about 14 staff and growing is dispersed around the world and was long before COVID. We absolutely rely on freelancers. About half our coverage is provided by contributors, and we work with our contributors in a spirit of wholehearted collaboration to shape and edit the story, to figure out the best way to present it, and to ensure it reaches the most influential readers. We're multi-platform and multimedia, and while the 1,200 to 1,500 word deeply nuanced reported story may be our hallmark, we believe fantastic coverage comes in all formats, from audiograms to reporters' video diaries. And we collaborate closely with our contributors, seeking to highlight the work of local journalists on the ground, as well as international journalists who are deeply committed to and familiar with a region or topic, and who are willing to recognize and credit their sources on the ground, which includes the contributions of journalists, often known as fixers. Finally, I'd just like to add that we need and depend on your contributions, on your knowledge and expertise on the ground. So I really welcome everyone who's listening to think about how we may work together and get in touch. There are contacts on our site, and you can reach all of us with our first name at thenewhumanitarian.org.
Fantastic. Thank you, Josephine. Lots of information there. Excuse me. So let's go on to some questions. And actually, Josephine, let's start with you. In terms of the kind of stories that you're looking for at the New Humanitarian, if people want to pitch you, what are the 3 things that you look for in a really great pitch?
That's a great question. What we're looking for in a really great pitch is, why is this story urgent or timely? Why now? We publish 8 to 10 pieces a week. We have a small team, so everything we chose is chosen with a great deal of intentionality, and we need to leave many great ideas off our site. So we're really looking for a time peg or some trend or something that will tell readers, you've got to pick this up now. Our coverage, as you can imagine, is often is very heavy. So and there are plenty of crises to cover. So we need to understand why your pitch needs to be heard now. We need to understand why this story is important to the reader. If someone's looking at the story at a promo on social, why should they care? Why should they invest their time? And we also really need to know, what's the secret sauce? What makes your piece unique? Is it the access that you have? Are you somewhere few people have been? Do you have fantastic multimedia? Are you looking at an ongoing situation with a new narrative? Are you looking at it through the lens of constructive or solutions journalism? What's the twist that will really make this story stand out from so many others?
Fantastic. So timeliness, why is it relevant to the audience, and what's the twist? In a nutshell, great. Lola G, I know Outriders focuses a little bit more on slow journalism. So how does the timeliness factor play into that? Would that still be something that you're looking for in a pitch?
Yeah, firstly, since we invest a lot of time and researches in each story, we look for different ways of telling a story. Not something that is breaking news, but something that you really look for another approach to this story. Something that I would like to say, I think when someone really believes in the idea, I think it's easier to communicate to the editor or to another person that you need to cover this. So to believe in the idea is one of the points. Secondly, as we said, we especially focus on solution journalism. So we prefer this approach. When you send the email, I would like to say, send a title. Even later you change the title of the story, but it's very important, if you read a lot of emails, to have this catchy title that you are going to continue reading. Yeah, I would like to say that this is...
Absolutely. Would you suggest that they put a proposed title in the subject line or actually further down in the pitch?
I think it's better in the email, but depend on, sometimes if you work with visual materials and you have a lot of material already that you did, you need to send a portfolio or something, but something that really catch your attention in the email.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lola H, how about you? What are the 3 things that you look for in a successful pitch?
Well, Josephine and the other Lola had said very useful tips, so I can complete them. Talking about the pitch, not the report, only the pitch, and what to do when you email an editor. Because editors are usually very, very busy in the newsroom, everything's a mess, and we don't have much time. We have to read and reply dozens of emails every day. So I will say that the easiest you make it for the editor, you're gonna get more success to get an answer, a fast answer, and to get your report published. So I will recommend, don't write very long emails explaining all the report on it. Just, as Lola said, give a title and a short explanation. And of course, be sure that the story you're going to pitch is something that you can publish in that section, because sometimes we get very good ideas, but they don't fit in Planeta Futuro. They fit in the politics area or whatever other. And also check that your story has not been published before, because sometimes we have also this problem that people don't know very well what they are selling. And then the last thing is that, from my point of view, if you send the report or all the material that you want to publish, I'm going to check it from the very beginning, so I can say faster if we want to buy your story or not, because sometimes the idea is very good, but then the content lacks of data or whatever is not good enough. So we extending the time. We are making the contributors wait until they have a final response. And I know that freelancers, they also need to hurry up, and they need to know if they are going to buy or not they report to any media, or they can pitch to another one. So if they send all the pictures, text, whatever they have, we can take a good look on it and give a final answer. And this way everything goes faster for everyone. That's my
absolutely. It's a really good tip. I know as a freelance journalist myself, I will always do a site search on the particular site that I want to publish to, that I'm pitching, to see if they've covered anything similar. And if they have, it's not to say that I won't pitch the story, but I have to make sure that I have a different angle or a different approach to it. Right. So moving on to thinking about some of the things that freelancers get wrong, just really quickly, 2 or 3 things from each of you that freelancers do that you just think, oh, I wish they hadn't done that. I can't take this pitch, or it's something that frustrates you. Lola G, can you think of anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think one of the most common mistake is that you don't do the research before sending the idea. So maybe you sent an intention, a plan to do a story, but you didn't research. So I would say that you need to research like you're working already in this story before sending the idea. And secondly, that Lola Ebro mentioned before, sometimes there are very great stories, but if we are focusing climate change and you send something about a different topic, it's not something that we can publish right now. So yeah, research also about the place that you are pitching the story. But research, I think, is the most important for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Josephine, how about you? What are your top 2 or 3 bugbears in a pitch?
My colleagues have made great points. I think research is absolutely necessary. And I think one thing to really keep in mind when you're a freelancer, if your story is not taken by a certain publication, it doesn't mean it's a bad story. It just means it's not the right place for that story. That said, when we receive pitches, there has to be something more there than simply a good story. We often talk to people who say, all I want to do is tell a good story. That is fantastic. We all want to read a good story, but as a publisher, we need a reason to publish that story. We need to understand that that story is going to be found by audiences who can then have some impact. So when you're pitching, just be absolutely sure to tell me why I must read this story. What's the top line? What's the takeaway? What will I get out of this? No, it's not simply the narrative. It's not simply a character. It's not simply a beautiful anecdotal lead. It's what will I come away learning? What will make me feel smarter? What will help me in my everyday work? What will connect me to this world?
Mm-hmm. So relevance and research coming out on top there as both being really important. Lola H, how about you? Anything that annoys you about pitches or things that freelancers commonly get wrong?
Well, as I mentioned before, these kind of things like sending just a too short explanation, we don't know, we cannot decide if we are interested or not. Sometimes it's the opposite. They write very long emails, but they don't really say what they want to publish and why. But if I have to add something different now, I would say that I find that sometimes it's like, I think that we forget that we have the opportunity in this kind of media, like Outriders or New Humanitarian or Planeta Futuro, we have the opportunity to write stories that puts people in the front. We are not just writing like a short article for an economy section, for instance. So sometimes I find a lack of interest of putting the people, the main characters of the story in the front. I think that reports and figures are very important. They have to be there, always there, of course, but this has to be complemented with the people who is affected by the story that we are explaining. And I will encourage the contributors to put their people in the front, the people of their stories.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, those are the kind of stories that I personally find more interesting when you've got, you know, a lead character, for want of another phrase, who can essentially tell the story through the lens of their experience. It makes it much more relatable. And actually, just on that note, thinking about length. So Lola H, you mentioned there about not giving too brief of an explanation, but also not writing too long of a pitch. And this is something that the other panelists have touched upon as well. You know, do you have a specific number of paragraphs, or, you know, how long should a pitch be?
In my case, well, just a paragraph that explains, as Josephine said, the five W's of the journalism: who, what, where, why, and that's all. I mean, a main title and a short explanation that, hello, I want to share this story about this and this and this with you because this and this and this. And here is the text and the pictures or the video in case you want to check it. And that's all, because this way I will read it and say, okay, I like the idea. So then I will read the text. Oh, this is a very good text. So, hey, my friend, we want to publish your story. Do you agree? Yes. So it's done. It's done.
That's great. I think that is one thing that sometimes freelancers overthink, and they end up writing reams and reams. So you heard it, one paragraph, guys. Well researched, keep it tight, keep it relevant. Okay, so thinking specifically, ladies, about the global development issues that you cover, are there any topics at the moment that you think you need more stories on, more pitches on? What needs more attention? What topics are a little bit uncovered at the moment? Josephine, let's hear from you.
Sure. Well, there are a number of regions where we are always looking for freelancers, everywhere from looking for English language journalists in Central America or Spanish language journalists who are comfortable working with English speakers, to Ethiopia and areas of Asia, such as Myanmar, etc. Looking beyond regions, though, we are always interested in constructive solutions, forward-looking coverage. And that's really hard to do when covering crises and disasters, because really what it is reporting on what's working. It's reporting on what's alleviating a crisis. It's often not very obvious. So we are looking for freelancers who are really embedded deep into a situation, into an environment, who understand a situation inside and out, and are willing to put time into doing a longer, very nuanced story.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Lola G, how about you? What kind of stories would you love to receive more pitches on?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have a new section that is power, and it's about environment and climate change. So we are interested in stories about local responses to climate change. So instead of a big or wide topic, for instance, water, we really look for small stories in a local place that we are not able to find in other places. So local responses and about environment is something that we are looking for right now.
Right, lots of stories that people could potentially do about that at the moment. I look forward to reading some of them. I'm sure you're all going to get lots of pitches after this session, at least I hope so anyway. And last but not least, Lola H, how about you? What kind of stories would you like to receive pitches on at the moment?
Yeah, well, I have to stand for global health, I have to say, because in the previous meeting we had yesterday, you told us that most of the freelancers that are listening to us, they focus on climate change, gender equality, and that's perfect. And we are interested in climate change and gender equality, but I find that not many people writes about issues like the fight against malaria, HIV, and TB that are also in the global goals, and also the neglected tropical diseases. It's a bit uncovered, I would say. So we are very focused on these issues, and especially in the African continent. So, as Lola said, we are also looking for local stories made from the ground, from the field, and yeah, global health is our priority right now, I would say.
Excellent. I love that you each had slightly different responses to that question. So, whatever people watching are interested in, there should be something there that is relevant to you. So we have a few minutes left before we move on to questions from the audience. Do post those in the chat if you've got something that you want to ask our panelists that you haven't posted yet. In these last few minutes, ladies, I just would like to hear from you if there has been a particular pitch that you've received recently that you've loved and it's turned into a story that's done really well. If you've got an example to share just briefly, that would be great. So Lola G, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, we tried to explain something that every media was covering, that it was a pandemic for the first time. And we did it with different formats. So we worked with a Brazilian reporter and a Brazilian comic illustrator in a comic about favelas, how the favelas were responding to the COVID-19 problems like that they were happening in the neighborhood. And we also did a news game about these COVID strategies. So these two stories were a different way to cover something that all the media were working at the same time. And I think also the readers were a little tired to read again about the pandemic. So we used this different form.
Excellent. And what is the best way for people to pitch you if they want to get in touch? Can you share your email and your Twitter?
Yeah, we can send you the email. Write us to team at weareoutriders.com, and I think it's the best way to be in touch with us.
Okay, so team at outriders.com, and presumably they should put pitch or something similar in their subject line just to flag it up. Yeah, great. Josephine, let's hear from you. What's a story you've been pitched recently that you've loved?
There are so many of them. One that stands out in my mind, though, is one we published a few months ago out of Libya by an Italian journalist, Sarah Critta, and a Libyan photographer, Nada Harib. And it was from a town called Tarhuna, which is still grappling with the trauma and grievances of one of the early waves in this ongoing war about 10 years ago, dealing with unmarked graves, with figuring out what happened a decade ago, with trying to find some sort of justice. Very heavy, could be a very, very depressing piece. But what worked so well was that the reporter and photographer spent a lot of time on the ground. And so that story was told by people who were of the town and from the town. We had a great deal of multimedia, beautiful portraits. We had audiograms. The text itself was quite nuanced in that it spoke to local officials, it spoke to government officials, it spoke to all sorts of people throughout the town, and really put readers in this place. And rather than making this situation a sort of abstract, very far away type of piece, it really brought it home, and it felt as if you were listening to the stories of people who could be your neighbors, and it did quite well, both on our site and through shares on social.
Sounds fascinating, Josephine. And again, it's telling stories through the lives of ordinary people rather than through facts and figures.
I think if I could just add, I think what really worked in that story was it was a true collaboration between the reporter, the photographer, and our editors and presentation team. So that's the way we love to work.
That's great. I know we've got a lot of freelancers in the audience who are big on collaboration too. So that's great to hear. And Josephine, what's the best way for people to pitch you?
people can reach out to any one of our regional editors. You'll find them on our site, on the team page, or at hello@thenewhumanitarian.
Great, thank you very much. And last but not least, Lola H, what's a story you've been pitched recently that you've loved?
I would say 2 different stories to show that you can show different formats, and both are very good. On one hand, we have a multimedia feature called Lungs of the Earth. I shared it before. And I like this one because it's very innovative. It has a lot of multimedia elements. It's a very good work in terms of research and also writing. It's very beautiful to read it. And I like it also because we had the first part of this story like 2 years ago, and the journalist came and made the second part. So they have been following the story. And I like that very much. And then on the other hand, we have a very simple story in terms of it's only a text and some pictures. It's called The Real Story Behind the Murder of Sergio Rojas. He was an indigenous leader in Costa Rica who was killed. And it's a very big research, a very long text, but it doesn't matter because it's so cool to read it. It has so amazing work behind that you read it and you don't realize that time is passing by. I mean, it's very long. We don't usually publish so long stories, but in this case, it worth it. Yes, so I would say these 2 very different but very good. Both of them. And I would say also, I would like to add that we accept contributions in English because we translate into Spanish. So the language must not be a problem for the freelancers. Okay.
That's great to know. And how can people pitch you?
Sorry?
How can people pitch you? What's the email? Yes.
Yeah, email, sorry. The email is Planeta Futuro, like future planet, but in Spanish, planetafuturo@elpaís.es. From España, es.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to all of you. It's been really, really interesting and informative. I've certainly learned a lot. I'm sure our watchers have learned a lot as well. I think we might just have a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. So if you can stick around for those, that would be great. Angela, over to you.
Hi, Abigail. Hi, Josephine and Lola. Thank you so much for your contribution to this panel. I learned a lot. And then we have some questions from our audience. Let's start with Madrid No Frills. Madrid says, sorry, here it goes. I live in Madrid and pitch features to, for example, the BBC, The Guardian, the New York Times, but often get the response, we usually let our correspondents cover this. How do I get around this when pitching?
I'd say you could pitch to the New Humanitarian instead.
That's a good answer.
No, that is a frustrating answer. Unfortunately, just from my time at one of those large media organizations, that's often the case, that they will prefer to have their own correspondents cover the story. So maybe that's just not the right place for your story, or maybe you need to find a story that absolutely only you have and that is unique to you. And that's how you tempt them.
Somebody else wants to answer?
I would say that most of times correspondents are covering breaking news, but with the news that we have every day, then they don't have time to cover different news. So I will try to pitch not breaking news, but other stories that are not on the, that are not so recent, and you can make like a more research, and I don't know, maybe this way.
Okay, we have these questions from Laura Oliver. Lola Hierro answers it before, but for the rest, are the topics regions that are under pitch or alternative topics where you are inundated regularly with pitches?
Yes, first of all, topics, regions where Sub-Saharan Africa, we would like to have more journalists around, and especially local journalists. Also, Southeast Asia and the islands. It's very difficult to find stories from that remote area. And then on the other hand, something that I find is that always that we get a pitch from South America is about indigenous doing something. And it's okay that we have to publish a lot of things about indigenous rights, but there's more people in Latin America, not only indigenous people. So we also love to have other kind of stories.
I can move to the next questions from Leo Correa. Leo asks, is there any difference when the pitch is being offered by a text reporter, photo or video journalist? And he adds, for instance, when video journalist offers a piece, you usually also give the support to complement the story?
Yeah, in our case, we work with visual reporters, so we work, we do the developing in the newsroom. So, for instance, we work with a filmmaker, but all the developing process we do it at home. So we work with everything: reporters, illustrators, photographers, and we work in a similar way. But of course, we have a special focus on visual stories.
There is here another question from Carmen Ibanez Espinosa that goes to Lola Hierro. Do you buy the report already written, recorded, or filmed? Does the pitch have to include the piece already made?
In my opinion, it's better if you send all the everything you have in order to take a final decision. So yes, we can buy it. Sometimes we have new contributors that they have not written yet the story. And what I can say to them is, okay, I like your story, but until I read it, I don't know if it's good enough to publish it. So you have to take the risk. Maybe you write it, then it doesn't fit for any reason, and we cannot buy it. So it depends on you also if you want to take the risk.
So thank you very much, ladies. Thank you, Abigail, Lola Hierro, Lola G, and Josephine for being here today with us and for this panel. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you, all of our speakers and the participants, for being here today and for sharing your know-how and the time with all of us. Now it is time to move on to the breakout rooms on Zoom. Those of you who wish to unleash your inner data journalist, you can join Adaugo Isaac and Stephanie Nikesa from Code from Africa in breakout room number 1, Data Journalism, Crunching the Numbers, Enhancing Your Stories. Those of you who want to learn how to transform your smartphone into a centerpiece of your storytelling toolkit, then you can join the breakout room number 2, Mobile Journalism for Freelancers, the Future of Storytelling, hosted by Yusuf Omar, co-founder of #OurStories. You can find both links in the chat. The workshop will start in 5 minutes, meaning at 12:10. From my part, I hope you enjoy a lot today and you enjoy the workshops. And I'll see you again tomorrow at 9:15 CEST to continue empowering the freelance community. Have a great afternoon, you all. I'll stay here just for 5 minutes if you have some questions. Bye-bye.